Alrighty, let's begin our announcement.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us for our announcement today. I'm joined today with Sandra Clarkson, who's the CEO of the Drop-In Centre here in Alberta, Robin James, who is the CEO of Lethbridge Housing Authority in Lethbridge, and my colleague Justin Wright from Cypress Medicine Hat. I am excited today to talk about some of the work that we've been doing on homelessness, and particularly, though, I want to bring us back to 2021, when the then Minister of Community and Social Services set up a community response to homelessness task force. That task force was chaired by the Chief of the Edmonton Police Service, Dale McPhee, and the CEO of the Calgary Homeless Foundation, Patricia Jones. As a result of that task force's work, the Alberta Action Plan on Homelessness was developed in 2022. The province, over the last few years, has been working with our partners to diligently implement that action plan, providing significant investments in homeless support systems all across Alberta. Some of the key recommendations from that task force work were for the province to take a province-wide approach to managing the system, modernization of our shelters and efforts to build shelter differently, sharing of data across the system, connection to broader social services systems and broader social housing systems, as well as a focus on the Alberta recovery model. To accomplish these objectives, Alberta has made unprecedented investments in this work, investing over $217 million a year in homelessness supports, $840 million directly in investments in capital since 2019 to create 5,000 new affordable housing units, and currently are investing another $840 million in capital in this budget year in another 5,000 affordable housing units, all part of a $9 billion investment with our partners to create 82,000 more affordable households across the province. We also heard the need for the province to move all of our shelter systems to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Work on that was completed in 2023. Currently, all of our shelter system in our province is available to those who need it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We also brought in Indigenous-led shelters, partnering with the Blood Department of Health on the shelter operations in Lethbridge and with the Enoch Cree Nation in Edmonton as examples. And we've worked on women-only shelter spaces, which we heard was a top priority. All of this is part of a process to bring our overall system up to the capacity that was needed, particularly in our largest cities. Edmonton's #1 ask in 2023 when I became minister was to build their shelter system above 1,700 spaces. Today in Edmonton we have 1,850 spaces, and in Calgary we have 2,162 spaces, all part of a 5,100 space shelter system across our 7 largest cities in this province. Alberta also invested in our new navigation centres in Calgary and in Edmonton that, together with our partners who are working with us at the navigation centre, has impacted thousands of vulnerable Albertans' lives, providing dozens of services including health supports, ID supports, access to addiction supports, and connection to housing. There's also been a significant investment in Alberta's recovery model, including tens of thousands of new addiction recovery spaces being built in our province. So today I'd like to take a moment and celebrate that work, and particularly thank the staff in my department and the hundreds of nonprofit providers and their dedicated employers that work with the department each day to care for Alberta's most vulnerable. Our success the last couple of years would not have come without their dedication and hard work. Which brings me to today's announcement. First, as we near the completion of the work from the 2022 Action Plan, we need to begin to look to the future of what is next to build on that success. We know with the changing circumstances and increased investment by the province that there needs to be more province-wide planning and increased oversight and accountability of supports provided to Albertans at risk of experiencing homelessness. We are seeing increases in rural homelessness and challenges that we've never seen before in communities like Slave Lake and Pinoka. When the original system was built, it focused predominantly on the 7 largest cities, mainly because homeless challenges in rural communities were not significant at the time. Today, though, we are seeing increased needs for homeless supports in rural Alberta and smaller communities that will require different supports and different services that we use than we use in large cities. We are also seeing more and more pressure from the increased drug epidemic that needs to be discussed. And lastly, we're seeing people who have never used the shelter system previously that require different kinds of supports as they interact with our system. And I think we need to recognize that we have learned from the past, and we need to take into account our successes and our failures as we look to the future. which is why today I'm announcing that Alberta is creating a new advisory panel made up of experts in this field to guide us into the next phase of addressing homelessness in our province. This advisory panel will provide long-term, strategic advice on homelessness with an increased focus on Indigenous peoples, homelessness in rural communities, addiction recovery, housing, and a connection to broader social services and healthcare systems in our province. This panel will be co-chaired by my colleague Justin Wright, the MLA for Cypress Medicine Hat, and Robin James, who is the CEO of the Lethbridge Housing Authority. We will announce the additional members of the panel at a later date as we work with Justin and Robin to put together the best team for their work. This work builds on both the report done by the Coordinated Community Response Homeless Task Force and a commitment in the Alberta October 2022 Action Plan on Homelessness to test and develop new approaches to address the issue of homelessness. Another key piece of this is working together to better collect data on a provincial scale and working to share that back with our service providers and communities, which will provide better outcomes for those seeking help. This will help us create a continuum of services and provide better outcomes for our clients. Today, I'm also announcing changes to how we administer grants to our frontline service providers in our province. One of the recommendations from the task force in 2021 was to deploy provincial funding with the aim of better coordinating community responses across the province, and for us as a government to review funding models, particularly how funding is deployed. As part of this next phase of this work from the task force, provincial funding for housing with supports will be provided directly to service providers in Alberta by the Alberta government going forward. This funding, about $101.5 million in 2024 and 2025, is currently provided to 7 community-based organizations that then distribute and administer the grants on behalf of the province. This funding supports people experiencing homelessness to move into and maintain stable housing with wraparound supports, such as addiction treatment, mental health services, employment skills and training, and rent support. This decision to have the province fund service providers directly will increase accountability and oversight of supports for Albertans experiencing homelessness. The goal is to create a stronger continuity of supports that includes leveraging navigation and support centres, emergency and transitional shelters, and housing supports all across our province. Government will continue to work closely with service providers, shelter operators, municipalities, and community partners to ensure minimal disruption in services as grant administration is moved to the overall homeless funding system in our province. This will provide administrative efficiency, accountability, and key connections to the overall system's investment. It will not result in funding reductions, but will result in more money going to frontline services and less red tape in the grant process. One of the first tasks of our new advisory committee is to work with stakeholders on the development of that new process on grant funding in the coming months. Our goal in Alberta, as always, is to ensure supports and services are available to those who need them. We are confident that the changes we are announcing today will have a positive impact on Albertans experiencing homelessness, and I am very much looking forward to announcing new actions coming from our new advisory panel in the coming months and years as we work together as a province to continue our very important work. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome to the podium my friend Robin James, the CEO of the Lethbridge Housing Authority, to talk about how this announcement impacts her organization. Robin?
Thank you, Minister Nixon. I'm pleased to be here today to support the province's continued work to improve supports for those most vulnerable in our province. As we provide housing and housing supports for nearly 2,000 people in the city and the surrounding areas in Lethbridge, I see the value of providing true wraparound services to people facing homelessness every day. The impact of these services are life-changing. Over the last 2 years, Lethbridge Housing Authority has been the provincial community-based organization. Through our work, we have seen the impact of provincial investments in shelter, housing, and housing supports that have been made in our community. We've been able to make more programs available for those who need it the most. However, we are also seeing changes in circumstance that are leading to people experiencing homelessness in our community. From more potent drugs on the streets to the changing complexities of mental health issues, and quite frankly, a combination of the two. With these challenges, we see a need for the Government of Alberta to take a lead role in assisting Alberta's most vulnerable. I commend the Government of Alberta for recognizing the changes needed in our communities and taking a key coordinated role in the systems and support across our province. Streamlining the grant process for housing programs is the right step forward. It will help coordinate the organizations serving vulnerable populations and enable us to provide true wraparound services to the people that need them. I'd like to thank Minister Nixon for the opportunity to be a part of this work in shaping the future of housing and homelessness funding in the province of Alberta. As we look to tackle these problems, I am eager to bring new innovative solutions to a system that supports long-term stability, housing-focused recovery, and hope to the Albertans we serve each day. At this time, I'd like to turn the time over to Sandra Clarkson. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. At the Calgary Drop-In Centre, we serve thousands of people each and every year, providing immediate support and working to get them on a path to long-term stability and success. Over many years, the DI has worked closely with other frontline service organizations to provide critical shelter, housing, addiction support, and other services for people in need. We see the full spectrum of people facing homelessness in our city, and what we are seeing has changed over time. Today, we see increasing complexity in mental health and addiction challenges, as well as seeing the need for specialized supports for women, families, and Indigenous people that are experiencing homelessness. I appreciate the work that the province has already done to acknowledge these needs and to take a more active role in funding and coordinating the emergency shelter system. Having that partnership with the province as a coordinator of the whole shelter system has meant that we've been able to make sure the right services are in place, when and where they are needed. I've had the benefit of developing this partnership with government, as well as other frontline providers, and I've seen the positive impact that this support has had on our sector, and particularly for those that we serve. Moving forward, I'm excited about the opportunity for organizations like the DI to continue to build this partnership and coordination through the housing programs that provide support to thousands of vulnerable Albertans each and every year. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to join Minister Nixon, Robin, and Sandra to support this important announcement today. As the MLA for the charming constituency of Cypress Medicine Hat, I've had the opportunity to work with many of our frontline service agencies in Medicine Hat and surrounding area on issues they face, including homelessness, mental health and addiction, and other social challenges. What I hear from the organizations who serve the vulnerable is how important it is to have coordinated service systems and resource awareness to support those in need when they need it. Like Minister Nixon mentioned, our province has made significant strides in supporting the vulnerable by increasing investments in shelter and housing. But in rural, small, and mid-sized urban centres like Medicine Hat, the current model is not able to fully meet the needs of individuals we mean to support today. One of my passions is ensuring that Albertans are able to navigate the support systems in their communities and get connected with the services they need. Something that comes from coordination, teamwork, between all members and agencies serving these Albertans. That is why I'm honored to be chairing the panel on the future framework of homelessness and housing supports funding with Robin James. By looking at funding in a new context than what we do today around mental health and addiction and support services, we can adapt to new approaches that ensure all Albertans in all communities have access to the supports when they need them. I look forward to working with the experts from across the province who will share their insights to help Albertans and our government shape the future of how we support our neighbours. Together, we can learn from past experiences and meet the challenges of today for the most vulnerable in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the formal portion of our announcement, and we'll move on to the media Q&A. We'll do one question, one follow-up, and please state your name and outlet for the record. We'll start in the room. Go ahead.
Hey, Tim Brooks, TV. Can you give me a little bit more information about as far as the timeline, when are we going to start to see the rest of the panel chosen? When are we going to see the results of what the panel has decided?
Yeah, my goal with not announcing the whole panel today was I really wanted to make sure that Justin and Robin had an opportunity, one, to participate in that process so they got the right team around them, but second, to have this conversation in a public way so we can start to talk to organization and leadership across the province and get the best team possible to get this work done. It'd be our goal to announce the rest of the panel early in the new year and then get to work on the work that we're doing. I do think it will end up probably being in 2 phases, where they may end up reporting back some immediate challenges that we give them, and then coming back with some follow-up to more long-term aspects of it. And one of the biggest challenges we're going to give them right off the bat is to have a conversation again how we continue to bring this whole funding model together to have its biggest impact on frontline services. So you'll hear more about the panel in the new year, or I think you'll hear from the panel itself at different times over the next 12 months to continue to build up our plan for the future.
My follow-up's for you, Justin. We were in this room yesterday talking about healthcare payment models and just how important it is to get primary care right so we can, I guess, spare other areas in health. So for you, when you're starting to do your work with this panel, how are you going to find that balance between things, long-term solutions, and also immediate need right now? Because obviously a lot of people are currently struggling with housing and maybe on that brink of homelessness already.
Yeah, and that's a great question and a very valid point. In regards to that breakdown of the immediate versus the long-term play and what we can go after. I think it's vitally important to really, get a hold of the experts and get them all in one room to start having conversations about how different communities have different challenges. While there is a certain overlap that is going to happen across all communities in Alberta, there's certainly unique challenges that individual communities will face, and that's why it's going to be so vitally important for Robin and I to make sure that we've got experts from across the sectors, but also across different communities to ensure that the individual needs are going to be met in the long term.
I'd actually add one thing to that, to Justin's excellent answer. One of the other areas that on the healthcare refocusing is me as the sector minister responsible for continuing care and my ministry taking a leadership role in that area. I think it's another area that if we don't get right, we're not going to be able to face the challenges that we face in acute care in particular. And one of the main focuses I want the new group to look at is how we interact with the broader social services system, but also with the healthcare system when it comes to continuing care. You know, things like the homeless and emergency rooms, or being able to access a different type of supportive medical housing that overlaps with multiple other issues like maybe addictions or what that looks like. And so I think that's also why this is a good time to have this conversation, to look at what we've accomplished in the past, but to recognize the changing structure in government and the fact that within the health refocusing is a once in a multi-decade opportunity for us to be able to make sure that we're interacting on these other issues like homelessness, disabilities, other aspects that you would see inside my ministry. And so we really want to make sure that we're taking this opportunity right now to get it right, because these opportunities in government don't come along all the time. And if we do it, I think we're going to be able to create something that's extraordinarily special, and the rest of the country will look to as an example.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions in the room, we'll move to the phones. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Your first caller comes from the line of Hiren Mansukani from Post Media Calgary. Your line is now open.
Hi, thank you. This is for Minister Nixon. I wanted to ask you, what were some of the problems associated with sending government money to umbrella organizations like the Calgary Homeless Foundation and then having them distribute the funding to other nonprofits?
The challenge that we have is when the structure was built around the 7 CBOs, it was at a very different time on the circumstances that we were seeing taking place around services to the homeless. The government was investing almost no money beyond that money that you would have sent to those 7 CBOs. The focus was on a structure that was focused on the 7 largest cities. Since then, we are now needing to build funding structures that are able to accommodate all of the province. Justin and I and our constituencies that have much smaller towns than Calgary and Edmonton, for the very first time in our career, though I think Medicine Hat probably likes to be called the city, Justin, so I'll say that, but no, none of my towns want to be called the city. For the very first time in my career as an MLA, we're starting to have these homeless questions that we would only have ever gotten from those 7 largest cities. So it shows that this is an expanding issue, and so we need to structure this as a full-wide provincial planning response, making sure that we're getting the appropriate services to the communities that need them. And the response inside Medicine Hat is going to be very different than the response inside Calgary based on many different factors, but I think it's pretty clear that the response will have to be different. And the reality is that now we're making other funding decisions that need to take into context what is taking place with that money that is flowing through the grants. At the end of the day, those grants are going to remain fully funded. They are going to go to frontline services. This money will not be reabsorbed into our department. It will continue to be spent on that line item directly at the services that it was designed for. And we know that we're going to see significant administrative efficiencies from taking this into the process. We've had to build an administrative process to issue grants now for the other work that the province is doing. It makes sense just from an administrative perspective to bring that all into one shop, which is going to get more money to the frontline services that need them and to the organizations that are working on the front line. It also lets us work with our nonprofit partners in the full scope. So, we have shelter providers, for example, that are receiving grants from the homeless division of my department, but they're also then going to the CBO to receive grants for portions of their housing projects. It is important that we have that conversation in the full context of the objective of the work that we're doing on homelessness, but on the objectives of the individual city that may be involved or the province as a whole. And then the other challenge we have is we've seen at times some of the funding that has left those CBO organizations going to organizations that did not fit or to projects that did not necessarily fit with the overall mandate of what the government was trying to accomplish. I think the vast majority of the work that was being done certainly fits within our mandate, but we want to make sure that we are focused on the issues that we've committed to Albertans on and that money is being invested in the most accountable way and providing the best results that we can for the people that we're trying to care for.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. On the last point you made, you said that there were some organizations that did not fit the provincial mandate. Do you have any specific examples?
We've seen stuff over the years where, for example, CBO money going to Alberta Health Services, which is not the mandate of my department to send money to another government department to try to do some sort of outreach service that we're not really sure how it connects to the overall homeless structure. That'd be one example. We've seen evidence in the past of organizations distributing tents out into the community. I think we've dealt with that over the last year or so, but that would be a great example of where our government is focused on shelter and housing, not on providing encampments. We want people in warm, safe shelters. I will point to the fire that had to be responded to in Calgary today in a very dangerous encampment situation as to why. And another example of, money flowing to pet food banks, of which I have pets. I think it's very important that we care for animals. But at the end of the day, that'd be a priority more on the SPCA side, not on me who's trying to tackle homelessness. Those are just a couple examples off the top of my head. At the end of the day, though, this is not about trying to take money away from the frontline organizations. It's the opposite. We are going to maintain that exact funding to frontline services. What this does is bring it into a much more administrative efficient process. And I think that Alberta taxpayers probably would be shocked to realize that for the last 20 years, we have been taking money, distributing it through a grant to multiple organizations who are then in turn just turning around and distributing it to another organization. I don't know what that middleman process would look like long-term, given the level of investment we're now putting into this area. I understand why that would make sense when that was the only investment that was being put in this area. But we now need to look at this in a global way.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Your next caller comes from the line of Morgan Black from Global News. Your line is now open.
Hi, everyone. I think my first question would be for Robin. I'm sure you know the big thing is getting people in the door of spaces like the Navigation Centre in Edmonton and Calgary. In Edmonton, police reports say 80% of people that were living in encampments and then had to leave refused a trip to the Navigation Centre. So how do you think a panel might address a problem such as that?
So your question is moving people through the system into the supports?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what we have to look at as a panel is how homelessness has become a tertiary system. When other systems fail, homelessness has been required to pick up the pieces on that. So when your mental health is unwell and you don't fit where you were, you fall into homelessness. When your addiction is so strong that you've lost everything and your family is struggling with you, you fall into homelessness. So I think that we need to look at this system from a provincial lens with this board and how the intersects happen in order to ensure those big encampments aren't happening, and ensuring that the primary care systems are taking up the pieces on the clients that we need to, and we're not just a tertiary system when all else fails.
And I think that, actually, I'm just going to follow up on that, because I actually think it's the wrong question. I hear why you're asking it. I think Robin would agree with me. The right question is how we connect to the broader social services system once we are able to connect with individuals that are experiencing homelessness, whether that's at the navigation center or a police officer or a doctor in the emergency room. What we have seen is that there's disconnect between all of those other areas with the system that we provide. I have been in the Lethbridge Hospital helping with some discharge issues down there recently to understand what was going on, and the social workers there, who do excellent work, I want to be very clear on that, weren't even aware of the services that Robin James and the Lethbridge Housing Authority could provide to their clients. So there's some sort of a disconnect, and we need to work as a government to bring this into a central process, to work together to be able to make sure we're bringing that wraparound supports around individuals, and we're connecting them to the excellent providers that we have across this province to be able to provide solutions to the circumstances that they find themselves in. So I strongly believe the number one thing we need to do, whether it's from continuing care to homelessness, is to have a conversation about making sure that that full power of the social services system, the government, the healthcare system can be brought to bear to help people that are facing some of the most unfortunate and dire circumstances in this province.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Morgan?
I do, yeah, and it's for the minister, please. So I recognize you're not naming the rest of the task force yet, and it seems that, you know, as you mentioned, rural communities facing these new challenges. But could you give us an idea of how major cities like Edmonton and Calgary will be represented on the task force or part of the conversation?
Well, I can for sure. And first, we will have wide representation recognizing the uniqueness of each of our communities. I don't want my comments to be taken as not saying we don't have to continue to work in the largest cities. It's just that we need to also recognize that we're seeing different challenges now in rural Alberta that have not been talked about as much as some of our largest cities' challenges. One example is we've asked Patricia Jones, CEO of the Calgary Homeless Foundation, which is a CBO, to participate in that process this morning. She has indicated to me that she wants to, so that would be an example of a representation from our largest city. And we will continue to be able to make sure that we have representation from both the sector, from municipalities, and from obviously with Justin, from caucus itself, and then also from housing authorities and other areas that don't traditionally work with the homeless each and every day, like our shelter system, but are where we're trying to connect to. I would add to that also probably some healthcare representation or some connection to that overall work that we're doing with continuing care.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Your next question comes from the line of Mike Campbell from Counter Signal. Your line is now open.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. This is for the minister. Speaking of housing, but on another topic, sort of, it's been over 100 days since the Jasper fire took out about a third of the town. Many are still struggling to rebuild. Could you give us an update on the situation and comment on whether you believe the federal government has been helpful in assisting with the disaster that many feel was caused by their negligence?
The situation in Jasper, I'll say a couple things. First, I'll start with housing. The Premier and our government recognized that we wanted to help Jasperites who went through a devastating circumstance this summer. And one of the number one things that we were concerned about was providing an avenue for Jasperites to return to their home to help build the town. While their homes are being built and other aspects of the town are being built, so it can continue to do its main role, which is to be one of the crown jewels of this province and provide people access to some of the most beautiful areas in the world, not just in Alberta. We have, at times, from our perspective, we feel that we continue to see roadblocks from both the federal government and, frankly, at times from the municipality of Jasper. At its core, I think the challenges come down to the fact that the National Park Service, underneath the federal government's leadership, has not answered the questions about the fact that the community of Jasper, the municipal district of Jasper, needs to be expanded to accommodate their housing needs, not just their housing needs associated with the fire, but the fact that they were already short a pretty significant amount of housing before the fire took place. And so we continue to be in a spot where we right now have almost $100 million in investment in houses that we could start to have stood up as early as the last week of January, maybe the first week of February, that we're ready to go on, that Alberta wants to invest in that community. And to this date, we cannot get clarity on land that it can be put on. Jasper continues to have concerns that by us bringing in that investment in housing, that is the last pieces of land that they have anywhere, and that the federal government will not expand the borders of the town. And so at this point seem less concerned with immediate housing for those who have been impacted by the fire and more concerned about what will be the longevity of their town, which I certainly sympathize with. And at this point, last I've heard from Jasper is they prefer us to try to build all the fire housing in Hinton, which comes with its own logistical challenges. We also continue to run into some, frankly, from our perspective, some unreasonable conversations on the environmental side, which we're still continuing to try to work through with parks. Things like, concerns about ground squirrels or these type of issues, which we think could be worked through. But we need to do this recognizing the main goal, which is to get people housing that have lost their homes in a fire this past summer and make sure that they can be there while their homes are being rebuilt. The other challenge to this is the fact that the federal government in Ottawa has been in a state of chaos for an extended period of time. Me and Minister McIver, who are the primary leads as ministers for the recovery of Jasper, have not had a counterpart in months since the minister that was designated for that left cabinet. We are having a heck of a time getting any sort of communication back with the federal government. I sympathize. I've been there before during government changes. It's a tough time. But the reality is it makes it very hard to know what is taking place. So the Premier has written a letter to the Prime Minister yesterday indicating that we really would like them to focus on figuring out how we can make longevity to the town with land and to be able to make sure that we can get this work done, but also indicating that if we can't, that we expect the federal government to step up to the plate and figure out what they're going to do for the community of Jasper. Because at the end of the day, we can invest. We don't control the land or the area inside the provincial inside the national park. The federal government does. I anticipate, given the events in Ottawa today, that we will have more clarity on who our counterparts are. I intend to call the new federal housing minister right after this press conference to raise the issue of Jasper with them. I know the Premier has spoken to the finance minister federally as well about this issue, and we do hope that we'll hear a response soon. But at the end of the day, we just want to help people that lost their homes, but we can't do it without the federal government. And I think I also will continue to call on the federal government to invest in that community. At this point, if you look at the numbers that have been invested in Jasper since the fire, it is almost exclusively the provincial government. And if that is going to be what the case is, the position of our province will be, we need the federal government to get out of the way or provide us the ability to accomplish that our goal is to be able to help Albertans. If not, they need to step in and start to do their job to keep care of their national park.
Thank you, Mike. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so just related, like if the feds don't step up, does the province have any tools that would allow them to take more control of the national park?
The way things are structured when it comes to national parks severely limits the province's tools compared to any other municipal area in this province. Frankly, if this is anywhere but a national park, we'd already have housing standing up. That said, the Jasper Recovery Task Force, made up of cabinet ministers, led by Minister McIver, the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and the Premier herself, are meeting weekly right now to determine any option that we have. We prefer not to make this political. This is not political for us. We actually just want to get to work to help that community. And so, again, I cannot stress this enough. I hope that as we see a cabinet shuffle today and maybe some stabilization to the situation in Ottawa for a little bit, that we can get to the table with our federal counterparts. We can help the people in Jasper who have experienced an unprecedented tragedy. But we cannot do that without the landowner, being the federal government through the National Park Service, being at the table, being able to accommodate the goals that the province has, and I believe the community of Jasper has as a whole.
Thank you, operator. Can you please put through the next caller?
Your next question comes from the line of Michelle Belfontaine from CBC. Your line is now open.
Thank you. Question for the minister. I wanted to get back to this idea of there being a middleman with the CBOs. So I wonder if I'm just looking for an Edmonton example. So is the CBO in Edmonton Homeward Trust?
The CBO in Edmonton is Homeward Trust, yes.
Okay. So what you're saying now is that the money that would normally be given to Homeward Trust to support, say, drop-in and warming centers and other kinds of services that they offer will now go directly to the agencies, the other agencies. Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to clarify.
Yes, that is exactly what we're saying. That now that agency will sometimes still be Homeward Trust for frontline services that they may be providing, housing programs that they may be providing. Certainly Homeward Trust will continue to do their work as an operator in that field. But we also send money to Homeward Trust that they then distribute to other organizations, specifically through a grant process. That's what the money is designed for. It goes there, they distribute it. Again, it was at a time where that would have been the only investment coming from the province when it came to homelessness. And we are now going to take that back in-house and add that to the overall grant process. Again, I want to stress all that money will continue to go to those cities, directly to those frontline services that have already been providing the services, but we will administrate the grant process through one shop from this point forward. Thank
you, Michelle. Do you have a follow-up?
Okay. Yeah, so again, I'm just trying to clarify. What problem are you trying to solve here?
Well, first off, the task force in 2021, which was co-chaired by the CEO of the Calgary Homeless Foundation, so our largest CBO, on par or certainly with Homeward Trust. One of the strong recommendations that they told us was to bring in a coordinated planning process led by the provincial government when it came to funding. And so that's one aspect that we're trying to do, is to be able to make sure that we are making these decisions when it comes to our investment with this money, with all of it in one pool, understanding what we're trying to accomplish in different areas of the province. We also, the province can do that grant process significantly more efficiently than 7 CBOs. And as a result of that, we actually are expecting some efficiencies that are going to get more money out of the administrative process and to frontline service providers. But at the end of the day, we are complying and working towards the goal that the task force asked us to look at in 2021, which was bringing in a coordinated planning process as a province and having the province lead the process of coordinating that response and that investment across the province. I'd add one other thing to that. We need to expand beyond 7 CBOs. When this situation was created, this structure was created in the mid-2000s, we were only seeing really homeless challenges of any significance inside those 7 largest cities. And so the system was built to care for those 7 largest cities. We now are seeing homeless challenges from every corner of the province, largely driven by what's taking place with drugs in the province. And we need to build that coordinated response now across the province as a whole. And we can't do that if we did that through the CBO model as we begin to expand across the province.
Thank you, operator. Can you please put through the next caller?
Your next caller is from Jake Birkenberg from Czech TV News. Your line is now open.
Hi, I have a question for Justin, just in regards to the Medicine, or sorry, the Mustard Seed Homeless Shelter, specifically in Medicine Hat. There's been an overwhelming criticism with its residential location specifically, and concerning the safety of said residents. But I'm just curious, maybe not specifically, but maybe in theory, would there be one ideal location for a single shelter? I know it's been expressed that a single shelter would be ideal as far as Medicine Hat specifically, but is this even a possibility to meet the needs of everyone in this kind of situation, the general public included?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something we've been chasing after here for the better part of 6 months, working with our CBO to identify a location that is going to mitigate the impact to neighbors I've been down by the resource center for the mustard seed in Medicine Hat on the Allowance Ave location. I've seen the situations. I've met with stakeholders and community members from down there. There is a solution that's currently being worked on by the CBO to find a location in support of the mustard seed that will provide one location, mitigating the transient problems of folks traveling from the resource center to the shelter and problems that exist along that path as well. So they are in the midst of a search for that location, and I understand that they have a short list right now and are working through that process to ensure that we have got something that meets the needs of those who are currently facing homelessness and problems around mental health and addiction that have caused them to be homeless, as well as finding a solution to really address the neighborhood's concern with that location.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Just to your knowledge, as far as aforementioned communication, between the city and the shelter, I know there's been some struggles there. So would you be able to speak on that at all?
Well, between the city and the shelter, I wouldn't be able to speak to that at all. I can speak to meetings that I've had in my office with members of the Mustard Seed, City Council, and other stakeholders like Medicine Hat Community Housing to discuss winter response plans, responding to increases in the ebbs and flows of folks coming through Medicine Hat that are experiencing homelessness. And as we've continued to look forward for solutions, we were actually able to meet with Minister Nixon and some of his members of his department, as well as the CBO, the Mustard Seed, and members of City Council, where we laid out an expectation as to what the long-term play was to move the mustard seed to one location from where it's at, to address both the needs of those experiencing homelessness, but also the needs of the neighborhood, to ensure that we are addressing their concerns fully.
Thank you. That concludes all the time we have today for today's announcement. So please feel free to follow up with me if you have any additional questions.